to introduce Saurabh sir. Please, sir. Over to Shinde sir.
शिंदे सर अनम्यूट करा तुम्ही.
Thanks to Professor D.T. Gaikwad sir. Good morning to all. Respected Principal Dr. H. N. More sir, faculties and dear delegates. On the behalf of Bharati Vidyapith College of Pharmacy, Kolhapur, I heartily welcome today's speaker, faculties and delegates in this one-week FDP program. It's give me immense pleasure to welcome and introduce our today's guest speaker, Dr. Srinivas Savale. He is my good friend, classmate, and roommate. He is a very dedicating, charming, and good-hearted, multifaceted personality. I really thanks to Dr. Srinivas for accepting our invitation and presence for this FDP program.
Thank you.
He completed his B.Pharm from Government College of Pharmacy, Karad, Masters from LM College of Pharmacy, Ahmedabad, and PhD in Pharmaceutical Sciences at Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. Presently, he is working as a CEO of AIC LMCP Foundation at LM College of Pharmacy, Ahmedabad. He is an acknowledged leader with over 20 years of professional experience in the drug research, development, and compliance in pharmaceutical organization, CRO setup, and academia. His expertise in the area of GLP, GCP, GMP compliance, including data integrity, gap analysis, resolution of electronic data workflow and IT systems. He also expertise in CRO vendor qualification, electronic solution development for automation of bioanalytical and clinical laboratory workflows, and clinical workflow phase 1, PA and BE. He has been part of various startup and innovation-related initiatives at LM College of Pharmacy, such as a member of Committee and Mentor for Innovation and Incubation Center. He also adjunct professor, quality assurance, MPharm and PharmD course. He is associated with Torrent Pharmaceutical Limited as a general manager, bioevaluation, Syngene International Limited as a head bioanalytical research. He served as a track screening chair bioanalytical chemical entity, abstract screening committee, AAPS Pharma Science 360, steering committee and member, clinical PK PD. Subcommittee Biosimilars Focus Group, AAPS, the founding chairman, Regulator Bioanalytical APA India. He also working as a member of steering committee for Global Analysis Consortium on harmonization for bioanalytical guidance representing Asia Pacific region. He has been reviewer for various national and international scientific journals and invited speaker at various national and international conferences. He has 21 publications, book chapter, and many scientific presentations. With this brief introduction, I would like to request Dr. Srinivas to address our delegates on this biosimilar emerging affordable modality in healthcare. Over to Dr. Srinivas, sir.
Like you are teaching to a great mass, not only for a class of 50 or 60 or 100.
Hello, Srinivas.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Shinde. It's always privilege to speak to you, and thank you for the opportunity to Bharati Vidyapeeth College of Pharmacy to share my understanding of this interesting topic, biosimilars, which are actually emerging affordable modalities in the healthcare. Before jumping into the topic, I just wanted to check that everybody is doing good in this very challenging time. So all of us are either in lockdown or we are not able to function the way we used to. So this is the best time for actually assimilating whatever knowledge in the field or sharpening the skills. And that's what I think this is one of the efforts through the faculty development program. That is what exactly is happening. So what I'm going to do in next 1 hour or maybe 1 hour 15 minutes is walk you through what is the status of this upcoming modality, because most of us we know that the small molecule R&D pipelines are drying up globally, and lot of innovation has been happening in the new area, that is biologicals or large molecules. What I understood from organizers is we have a mix of students and faculty as participants. So I will try to do justice for both the audiences. So bear with me if there are certain very basics and there are too advanced information. I'll try to connect you to the information I'm sharing. So what I'm trying to do now is the talk is divided into broadly into few sections. So we'll look at some of the top drugs currently available globally in terms of the revenues that they are generating. We'll also understand how biologics are different from the small molecules. And when I say biologics, how a biologic is different, I mean how a biosimilar is different from a biologic. What is the development path of a biosimilar? And what is the current regulatory landscape? Especially we'll look at the regulatory pathways for various regulatory agencies, like what is the status in India, Europe, and US. I'll also walk you through one of the case studies of the biosimilar, the first biosimilar that was approved by US FDA in 2015, that is Zarzio. And let's see the global scenario about biosimilars, and I'll then summarize my talk. So if you look at this particular slide, it clearly indicates that there are 15 such drugs which have created billions of dollars of revenue. So if you, the lowest being $5.3 billion, that is infliximab, the brand name is Remicade, and the topmost is Humira, adalimumab. So out of these 15 drugs, the red stars, what you see, they all are of biological origin. So they are biologics, and only so 11 of them are biologics, while you have only 4 who are in the top 15 by revenue are small molecules. So similar was the trend in 2018, where out of top 20 drugs, 11 drugs were from the biologics segment, and rest all were small molecules. So now from 11 out of 20 in 18 to 11 out of 15 in 19, we clearly see that there is a surge in people pursuing research in biologics and biosimilars. So majority of these biologics, now in the slide you will see those which are highlighted in red, they are biologics, and most of them are for chronic treatments. So if you see that either they are anti-cancers, they are for rheumatoid arthritis, they are for some of the immunological disorders. So it has been seen that these drugs have been very specific, and though they are very costly, the attempt has been made by all the pharma and biopharma companies globally is to make these modalities affordable to the patients. So just to touch some basics, as we can see on this slide, all of us are very familiar with small molecules, so which are low molecular weight compounds and very well characterized, which are chemically synthesized, and the process is very structured. You can optimize the processes very fast. You can also break the processes for manufacturing this chemically synthesized drug in parts, and you can have intermediates, you can have the bulk drug, you can even the formulation process also can be broken into unit operations, and you can have these drugs made available in the form of formulations, and most of them can be given orally, and they, as we see, they get distributed in various organs and tissues and get metabolized into either inactive or active metabolites. And most of the times their toxicity is associated with their preliminary action. So they generally don't produce any antigenic effects, and they are relatively easy to characterize or analyze in any given matrix. On the contrary, if we talk about large molecules or biologics, so they have higher molecular weights in kilodaltons. They are complex by their physicochemical nature. They are produced biotechnologically using cell lines or isolated from culture media, but they are very sensitive. So they get aggregated if they are exposed to higher heat or shear conditions, and most of the times it is very difficult to get a pure biology. In the sense, you will have heterogeneous mixture with broad specifications, and they become difficult to standardize. And primarily they are given parenterally, and they reach circulation via lymphatic system. So one has to keep in mind that these biologics have their unique structure, which is very sensitive to various uh, environmental conditions in terms of where they are prepared. And they are catabolized to endogenous amino acids, and their toxicity is most of the times mediated to receptors. As they are very high molecular weight and sometimes heterogeneous, they also have usually antigenic potential. And not one assay, but multiples of assays are required to actually quantitate and characterize these biological molecules. So these are the basic differences between the two. And for the same reason, for owing to their properties, the manufacturing also differs in a very wide sense. So as I told, the small molecule manufacturing is very straightforward. We have mastered that art very well. Even the formulations using these molecules is now, I mean, we know any kind of modality in small molecule. I think our education system also has been pro this small molecule formulations and different drug deliveries for that. And when it comes to the proteins or monoclonal antibodies, that is the biologics, they are expressed in microorganisms, and generally it is an aqueous processing. And what you see is it requires formulated bulk solution with cold storage. So since they are sensitive to heat and shear and all, so even the manufacturing process is very gentle and at a colder conditions. So most of the times these formulations are formulated as sterile vials, prefilled syringes or cartridges for injections and infusions without terminal steam sunlight. So what you see is the facility is designed for aseptic purposes, and that may not be the case for small molecule formulation manufacturing. And most of the times it is a vertically integrated process up to formulated bulk, and at the most you can separate the final formulation step, otherwise it can be a single process. So there is no concept of drug intermediate for biologics. So this slide clearly indicates the difference in a small molecule. The leftmost is the aspirin, as you see, and the rightmost is the coagulation factor factor 7, which is about 250,000 Daltons molecular weight. So, and as you see on the right side, it also clearly shows the complexity, the molecular structure these biologicals have. And because of that, they are difficult to characterize. Very small changes in the process parameters can change the three-dimensional structure and will have altogether different outcomes, sometimes even activity changes. So even substitution of single amino acid can cause dramatic change in the biological activity as well as immunogenicity of these molecules. So it's very important to ensure the 3D structure, degree and location of glycosylation, as well as different isoforms for getting the adequate pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic properties of these molecules. So sometimes, being a heterogeneous mixture, it may show multiple activities, and which may or may not be measurable, because the bioassays which are used for this activity determination, they are not very specific as well as sensitive. So when it comes to characterizing these large molecules or biologics, for small molecules, we all are very familiar with typical, say, identity purity, related substances, assay. If it is for solid oral solids, you have DT and DISO and other tests, which in a way, the typical pharmacopoeial monograph test can characterize your formulation. So that may be maximum 10 or 12 tests. But that is not the case for biologics. So you have many attributes to be established, which you can see on the left. That is the primary structure, the mass, disulfide bridging, so on and so forth. So this is just a partial list of various attributes a typical biologics can have. And on the right side are various methods that are being used to characterize the biologics or the large molecules. So here you will say that there's not only one HPLC, but you will have even mass spectrometric analysis with different types of ionization modes you need to utilize for characterizing these biologics. So you undertake amino acid sequencing, peptide mapping, element degradation. You have electrophoresis, different types of electrophoresis. Another important tool for structural characterization is HD exchange, that is hydrogen and deuterium exchange analysis. And of course, there are very specific tools such as DLS, MALS, FFS, FFF. So all these tools are very specific for biologics. So one has to appreciate the complexity of these molecules, and that's the reason you need an array of characterization tests. So if you look broadly on the biopharmaceutical space, it is biologics is one part of it. It also has diagnostics devices and health management services. So we are focusing only on the biologics and the biosimilars bit of this particular space. So typical biologics are either monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, insulins or peptides, and recombinant therapeutic proteins. So here, if you look at probably in the list, insulin is the lowest molecular weight compound in this biologics space, what I have shown on this slide. So most of these biologics are actually nearing the patent expiry. And that's where there's a big opportunity for all the people who want to come up with the similar versions of these biologics or the biosimilars. So I have given this list down, but just to avoid complexity in the flow of the slides, I'm skipping that. So it's very important to understand, as we know that for small molecules, when the patent expires, the innovator product loses the exclusivity. That's when the copy or the generics are getting permission to market in the market for patient use. Similarly, in biologics, when we have the innovator biologic coming off patent, you have chance to make similar biologic and come in the market after the exclusivity. So what is biosimilar? Let us go by a typical definition. So European Medicines Agency was the first one to have some formal document about biosimilars. In 2004, they had come up with a concept paper, and according to that, biosimilar is a new biological medicinal product which is similar to a licensed reference medicinal product, of course, a biologic. And when it comes to US FDA, it also calls biosimilars as follow-on biologics. So these are officially approved subsequent versions of innovator biopharmaceutical products, which are made by different sponsor following patent and exclusivity expiry of the innovative product. But it further details what do you mean by highly similar. Right? So when you say similar, it is not same. So highly similar to the reference biological product, notwithstanding minor differences in clinically inactive components, and for which there are no clinically meaningful differences between the biological product and the reference product in terms of safety, purity, and potency of the product. So what it means is the inactive components of the formulation they may be different. The biologic itself may have some differences. However, these differences are not significant, or these differences are not changing the safety, purity, and potency of that particular biological molecule. WHO has a different terminology for same. They call it as similar biotherapeutic product. And again, it is a biological medicinal product developed to be similar in terms of QSE, that is quality, safety, and efficacy of already licensed, well-established reference product, which is marketed by independent applicant. So same biosimilars is called as ACB, subsequent entry biologics, and similar biologics in India. So we call them as similar biologics. So if you look at where they stand in terms of small molecules and biologics, so biosimilars stand in between the generics and biologics. In terms of development, generics are scientifically not very difficult, but biologicals are very difficult to develop. And biosimilars are definitely complex and difficult than generics, small molecule generics, but not that difficult as the innovator biological product. So this diagram clearly shows where it stands. Now, the development timeline also is much higher than generics for biosimilars. So it may take about 8 to 10 years for bringing a biosimilar into market, where the generic small molecule you can do it in 3 to 4 years. Cost wise, for generics, you do a bioequivalence study and you can go for marketing the product as ANDA, but that's not the case for biosimilars. You also need to have adequate clinical evidence established for different scenarios, now depending on the activity or claiming. So the cost is anywhere between $200 to $300 million spent for biosimilars development. So it's a costly affair, but not as costly as an innovator biological product. And even the manufacturing process is complex in case of biosimilars. Now, as we saw that biosimilar is similar to the innovator biology. So innovator would have taken a lot of pain in developing that biology and also establishing process of manufacturing and getting it formulated. So that know-how is helpful for somebody who wants to come up with a biosimilar molecule. But you need very deep scientific understanding and strong manufacturing acumen if you want to be successful biosimilar manufacturer. And when it comes to the requirement of data, if you want to get your biosimilar approved, so this table again gives you comparative understanding in terms of what are the tests or data required to establish quality, what is the non-clinical evidence that you need to generate, and what is the clinical outcome studies that you need to perform. So if you look, I don't know how clear this color differentiation you can see on your slides, but there is a black, gray, and green. So under drug substance and drug product, you will see that all this black, that is manufacturing, characterization, quality control, reference standard, control closure system, stability, it is required both for biologic as well as biosimilar. But additionally for biosimilar, you need to provide comparability data, which is analytical comparison with the reference product. So similarly for drug product also, you have to have comparability data. Non-clinical also, you have to provide preliminary primary pharmacodynamic studies and compare it with the reference product. And you have to have a comparable repeat dose toxicity studies done for a biosimilar. When it comes to clinical evidence, so again, you have to do single dose PK studies and PD studies also. And you may have a specific indication. For example, one particular biologic is for ovarian cancer. So you have to have biosimilars efficacy proved in the same population as that of innovator. And in biologics, you have a very strong post-marketing commitment because these molecules may produce immunogenicity. So you may find the immunogenic outcomes may come after repeated dose, after certain days of treatment. So that's where you need to have even post-marketing surveillance plan. This is just a pictorial representation how a biological biosimilar is developed. So you have this target DNA, which you want to clone using a vector. And this is then expressed in some of the cell systems. And that particular, the target gene, a target DNA that is to be amplified, that particular cell system is further expanded. So that's where you see here. So you use different cell lines. I'm sorry. You use different. So you use different cell lines, check the conditions in which the cell growth is good, and use that optimized cell growth conditions for cell production in bioreactors. Now, once you do large scale cell production, then you go for next step is the separation by centrifugation or filtration. And then you purify the DNA or the recombinant protein of your interest by using various chromatographic techniques. And this purified bulk is then characterized and tested for its stability by using different methods, reagent, reference standards. And this becomes your drug substance or the bulk drug, which then can be aseptically filled or sterile filtered and made into the drug products and into the final content. So that's what exactly happens. So the cell growth stage is called as upstream process, and isolation and purification is called as downstream process. So these are the most common terminologies used in biologics manufacturing. So you look at the development path of this molecule. So you'll see that it takes, as I told, up to 8 years of time for developing this biologics. Now, what I am showing on this slide is only the preclinical and clinical phase. So that itself you will see is up to 6 years. So you have up to 1 year non-clinical comparability studies, and you have to do preliminary PK/PD studies using phase 1 and phase 2 studies. That takes about a year's time, and subsequently establishing the efficacy and safety in phase 3 trials. So here, the safety is not that elaborate as for a novel biologic, but it is an abbreviated safety is considered here. And you of course have to generate additional data post approval or post marketing. So there is a interesting difference between development of a biologic, novel biologic, and a biosimilar. So the inverted triangle what you see on the left, it is for the reference biologic. So that's where you can see that a lot of emphasis is on clinical studies, clinical evidence in terms of safety and efficacy. But if you look at the biosimilar, that is the normal triangle. So where you already have the knowledge of reference biology, that's why you don't need much of clinical evidence to be established. But very important is to have comparability in terms of physicochemical and structural characterization as well as functional characterization. So a lot of efforts for biosimilar goes into this phase, that is characterization. And that's where I was telling you, we use hundreds of tests to ensure that small little differences between the reference and the biosimilar are picked, because the approach in biosimilar development is to reduce uncertainty at each stage. So you keep comparing apple to apple, try and compare as many attributes as possible with the reference product as you move forward. So if you have characterized it thoroughly in the analytical stage, you may find that since there are negligible differences, you may find there are negligible differences in non-clinical stage, and so in the clinical stage. So this is called as level of uncertainty when you are comparing biologic and the biosimilar. So as you can see here in biosimilar development, it is very important to identify the reference product with which you want to compare. So you have to define and characterize the reference product. So you are defining the target. You have to have complete understanding of the product as well as process. Now, it is very important that your process should be such that it gives you as pure as possible the recombinant protein that you are looking for. So once you have understanding of the process of the innovator, you get quite a good insight into what process to follow. So you may have different cell lines used for producing the same recombinant protein, but then you need to know what residuals they may get carried to the process when you are making by different process. So once you have developed this process and product, then comes the major chunk is comparability with reference product in terms of analytical similarity, non-clinical similarity, clinical similarity, and immunogenicity potential similarity. So what I'm trying to show here is, in case of originator biologic or the novel biologic, the purpose is to prove that the new molecule has significant clinical benefit. And that's why a lot of clinical work is done. But when you talk of biosimilar, your purpose is to demonstrate that this molecule is essentially the same as that of reference product. So that's where similarity is the focus for biosimilars development. And if you look at the bottom boxes for novel biologic, the probability of success is less than 10%, while the probability of success in biosimilar is more than 80%. So globally, people are following stepwise development. Of course, it changes case by case, but the first step is always the comparability in terms of chemical and pharmaceutical data. So that's where a lot of efforts are put in to fingerprint, to have as much clarity on analytical similarity as possible. Even like for small molecules, we are familiar that after approval, if we are making any changes, post-approval changes to the process, to the formulation, one has to establish impact on the bioequivalence with the innovative product. Similarly, here also, any changes to the process or to the any post-translational differences which you see, those need to be again compared, and we have to understand the impact of the changes on the similarity with the reference product. Next comes is looking at the different impurities that may have come up during the process, because as I had earlier told, that these impurities also can be of immunogenic nature, and they may pose threat of adverse events. Next comes is the non-clinical studies. Again, as I told, you have to do PD studies and toxicity studies, but which are not that elaborate as for a novel biology. Next step in the development path is the clinical studies. Now here, if you can see clearly on the slide, that you have sometimes these PK/PD studies are done even in healthy subjects. But if you look at some of the therapeutic areas, you may have to go directly into the patient population. So you have to compare clinical outcome of this biosimilars. Also, the expectation here is you should design not only PK outcome studies, but it has to be PK/PD outcome studies when you go for comparability. So there is a big thrust on identifying suitable biomarkers and which can be measured, which can indicate the pharmacodynamic effect of this biosimilars. And that's where, when you are designing the studies for biosimilar, clinical studies for biosimilar, the approach is little different than that for the novel biologic. So you have to establish similarity in efficacy and safety in all indications and all sets of patients. And the funny part is when you are comparing clinical outcome, you may find that the innovator product is showing immunogenicity, and biosimilar also can show immunogenicity, but it has to be comparable. Or it is possible that innovator has immunogenicity, but biosimilar doesn't show any immunogenic potential. That is also fine. But if you see that the innovator doesn't show immunogenic potential, but the biosimilar has immunogenic potential, that's where the problem comes. So it is very important to compare PK, PD, efficacy, and immunogenicity. And when we see immunogenicity, we have to have a commitment that we will do pharmacovigilance study for minimum 12 months and even 24 months ongoing study post-approval. So this is a commitment any biological and biosimilar manufacturer has to give to the regulators. So it is very important to trace in the field what kind of adverse effects are because of the antigenicity or immunogenicity observed in the patient. So once you have these 4 components compared, that's where then comes the concept of totality of evidence. So in the development path, you have generated analytical evidence, non-clinical evidence, clinical evidence, as well as immunogenicity evidence. So collectively, it is compared with the novel biology. So it is possible that there is a 90% comparability in analytical comparison. Clinically, they shows, both the products show the same outcomes. So that 10% difference, what you see in the analytical comparison, you don't know whether it will translate into any changes to the efficacy or the safety. So totality of evidence is taking all these attributes together and correlating different comparability parameters to arrive at ultimate efficacy and safety of the biosimilar product. So that's called as totality of evidence. And as you see, some of these biologics are extrapolated to different indications. Like in the table what I had shown earlier, you will see there are some monoclonal antibodies which are effective for multiple types of carcinomas. But you will see that some of these monoclonals are also, for example, one monoclonal works for cancer also and for arthritis also. So this is extrapolating one particular biologic's activity to different indications. And this is not straightforward. You have to generate evidence in both scenarios, patients with both disease conditions. So I thought I'll just also emphasize on this immunogenicity part because it is the most critical safety concern as far as biologics are concerned. So some of the factors which may translate into immunogenicity issues are impurities, structural changes, and route of administration. So as it has been established that IV administration is less immunogenic as compared to intramuscular or subcutaneous administration. So that also has a role to play as far as immunogenicity is concerned. So most of the times, immunogenicity is seen on repeated administration or when there is a change in the physicochemical characterization of characters of the molecule. And you have to have at least a year's monitoring to assess what is happening with respect to immunogenicity. And the important part is this immunogenicity can be correlated to PKPD studies that you have done. So sometimes these PKPD observations also may give some indication on that. That's where you may find reactions, safety outcomes like hypersensitivity, infusion reactions, autoimmunity, or sometimes even loss of efficacy. So what happens is antibodies, if you talk about monoclonal antibodies, sometimes these antibodies develop kill for themselves. So those are neutralizing antibodies which are created by the body and which acts on the same therapeutic antibody and which reduces the efficacy. So sometimes the immunogenic exacerbation can be seen in terms of loss of efficacy. So these are some of the factors. I'll not go into detail, but you will need to keep in mind that there are process related factors, product related factors, patient related factors, as well as disease and treatment related factors as far as immunogenicity is concerned. So this is an interesting article. One can go through it because these products are very, very sensitive, and any changes in the during their development can have these adverse effects. So there are two aspects of evaluating a biosimilar. One is totality of evidence, which I already explained. So it is nothing but it's integrating various kinds of evidence in making the regulatory decision. And when it comes to extrapolation, you can see on the bottom. So one has to give a scientific justification if you want to support an extrapolation to indications and uses which are not clinically studied. So when you get marketing authorization for the first time, you would have done for X indication, and now you want to say that this biologic also works in Y indication, then you have to generate supporting evidence. So apart from the typical biosimilar development, you also have to have convincing non-clinical evidence to support extrapolation to a reference biological product. And it's very important, if the mechanism of action is different, you need to justify by supporting evidence that this is how it works. And so you just cannot take it for granted that if one particular monoclonal antibody works for X carcinoma, it will work for all types of carcinoma. So if you are extrapolating from one indication to another, you need to generate clinical evidence. So if we look at current regulatory scenario, most of the countries across the globe have come up with their guidelines for biologics and biosimilars. So EU was the first in 2004, and FDA is the latest with 2015. They come up with formal guidelines. No doubt they had an act and all, but the formal guidelines have come up in 2015. So if you look at this regulatory landscape, every country is getting into this sector, or you can say this class of molecules as therapies. And of course, India is not far behind. So we call these biosimilars as similar biologics, and it comes under Drugs and Cosmetics Act. And actually, in India, we got the first biologic approved in 2000. That was one of the hepatitis B vaccine. And we have not only a specific guideline, we have to follow multiple guidelines to develop a particular biologic or biosimilar. So there are recombinant DNA safety guidelines. There are guidelines on preclinical and clinical data for rDNA vaccines, diagnostics, and other biologics. Many CDSCO guidelines are there. There is also a handbook for institutional biosafety committees. And the latest guidance that we have is guidelines on similar biologics, regulatory requirements for marketing authorization in India. So if you have to get your biosimilar approved in India, you have to follow a certain path that I will tell you. Before that, this is the list of different regulations and guidelines that are applicable for these molecules. So you have EPA, Environment Protection Act, Drugs and Cosmetics Act. There are many guidelines from Department of Biotechnology, some from ICMR. There is National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving humans, and the CDSCO's guidance about preparation of quality information for drug submission for new drug approval, biotechnological and biological products. So typically, to get an approval for biosimilar in India, so you have to have these stages: product development, animal talks, clean trials, marketing and manufacturing license, and post-approval commitment. And there are deliverables under against each of these stages. You need approval from Institutional Biosafety Committee for product development and DBT. You also need to do animal toxicity studies in the GLP accredited lab. And the clinical trial protocol has to be approved by DCGI, and the manufacturing license has to be there for clinical trial batches. And there in clinical trial, you also have to have DSMB, Drug Safety Monitoring Board, which actually keeps tab on what is happening in the trial in terms of safety. So here last, if you see, even DCGI asks for pharmacovigilance commitment. So at least 4 years. And every 6 months, you have to do safety reporting to DCGI for first 2 years. Now, when it comes to the scenario of biosimilars in India, we have more than 130 companies who are in this biopharmaceutical space, and more than 10 companies are doing recombinant products. So we are a semi-regulated market. We don't have very stringent requirements for biosimilar approval. And we have been always, most of the biosimilar manufacturers in India, we are targeting unregulated markets or semi-regulated markets. But now in last 5 years, many companies in India have done strategic collaborations with innovators and have taken their biosimilars to global regulatory agencies. There have been some of the Biocon Mylan collaboration antibodies are in Europe market. They also got FDA's approval. So people are slowly moving to the regulated market and getting into this space. However, Government of India is planning to make process patents for these products mandatory. Coming to European Union, now here also you need to have comparability in terms of the analytical similarity, non-clinical and clinical studies, and immunogenicity studies as far as the developmental comparabilities are concerned, and then post-market pharmacovigilance commitment also has to be there. Now, there are different approaches of different regulatory agencies. So EMA considers that whatever guidelines they have come up for biologics, they will apply to even monoclonal antibodies. But there is a different thought in different countries that they have different treatment for monoclonal antibody requirement. So very important is EMA has come up with product specific, product class specific guidelines. You can see here recombinant erythropoietin, somatropin, human insulin, HGCA, and so on and so forth, like GCSF, human granulocyte colony stimulating factors. So like we see now, USFDA also has come up with product specific guidelines for bioequivalence study. Similarly, EMA has come up these kind of guidelines for biologics and biosimilars. So EMA was the first to approve the biosimilar in 2006, which is Omnitrop. And these are different guidelines what European Union has. So they have an overarching guideline called as Guideline on Similar Biological Medicinal Products, and which has general QAC guidelines and product specific guidelines. When it comes to US, the recent legislation is called as Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act. So all the biologics and biosimilars are governed by this act. And the approach is that each biosimilar or biologic will have a case specific approach for regulatory approval. So they are also thinking about coming with product specific guidelines, and approval is always based on the established comparability. And US also allows you to have regulatory consultation before going for your clinical development plan. So there are two types of biologics in US. One is biosimilar and second is interchangeable biologic. So what is the difference? So biosimilar we already saw, right? So there are no clinically significant differences between the innovator product and the similar product. But if you want to claim your biosimilar to be interchangeable, the product has to be producing same clinical result as that of reference product in any given patient, and if administered more than once, that the risk of alternating or switching between these two products is not greater than the risk on maintaining the patient on the reference product. So it clearly says that this interchangeable biosimilar is having same QAC as that of the innovator product. So even if you switch from innovator to this interchangeable biosimilar, there is no difference in the clinical outcome or safety outcome. That has to be ensured. Then only it can be called as an interchangeable biologic. And as you see in this box, all these biologics and biosimilars status is given in something called as purple book. All of us are familiar about orange book. So for biologics, it is purple book, where all these approved biologics and biosimilars and their status is listed by US FDA. So with this development on comparing the biologics for biosimilarity, there have been a lot of discussions, and as I was involved in the AAPS's group on clinical pharmacokinetics of biosimilars. So we had come up with this cover page article for AAPS News Magazine, where we thoroughly discussed the clinical pharmacology studies that are required to support demonstration of biosimilarity and interchangeability. So they are not same. Showing similarity can be something similar to a typical bioequivalence study, where you administer both the reference and the biosimilar product and look at the outcome. Interchangeability, it has different study design, so you need to incorporate the swapping of this innovator and the comparator biologic, innovator and the biosimilar, so that in the clinical protocol itself, you establish that even if I switch from the innovator to biosimilar, there is no impact on the efficacy and safety. So there are interesting terms which are important to understand. So as just now I told biosimilar and interchangeable. So there are these four terms called interchangeability, switching, and automatic substitution. So substitution is where the pharmacist can dispense alternate biologic. There is no need of approval from the prescriber. Automatic substitution is the pharmacist has to, it is must, to give the less costly options to the patient. Switching is where the prescriber has to give you, or he has to prescribe that change, switching from originator to the other. And interchangeability, as I already mentioned, it is about, again, prescriber's decision to switch the patient from the innovator product to different products. So there are different regulatory stands in different countries about substitution, interchangeability, and switching. Now I'm showing you, this is the list of different guidelines around biosimilars which USFDA has come up with. Those who are interested, just go to the link given at the bottom. So very very well drafted guidelines, and a lot of information is available. So with this regulatory overview and the landscape, I'm jumping now to a case study, how a biosimilar has been developed and approved. So this is the story of Zarzio, which is a granulocyte colony stimulating factor. The originator product is Neupogen from Amgen, and Sandoz has come up with its biosimilar. See what all evidence they have generated. So they had analytical comparability where battery of structural and functional assays were done. For non-clinical similarity, they did 5 different animal studies to assess PD, tox, toxicokinetics, and local tolerance. And for clinical, they did confirming similarity studies, 1 pivotal study, and 4 supportive PK/PD studies they had to do. So it's not that straightforward that you do one pilot study and 1 pivotal study and you submit your dossier. So you need to have because here purpose is not only compare the PK, you also have to have PK and PD compare. So during the development, as we do for even small molecules, you have to look at the critical quality attributes of your product. And that's what exactly was done in case of Zarzio. So you can see that the criticality of various attributes has been graded, red, orange, green, where you can see that amino acid sequence, potency, and target binding, as well as protein characteristic, protein concentration are very, very critical for the efficacy as well as safety. So which are those characterization aspects that can give you insight into these critical parameters? So you have the methods on the right, like potency is done by bioassay, target binding is done by SPR, protein is done by content determination, and amino acid sequencing is done by Edman degradation, peptide mapping, and mass spectrometry. So if you look at the overall exercise, first one was to establish similarity in amino acid sequence. So here that was done for Zarzio and Neupogen. Next comes is the peptide mapping and fingerprinting comparison. That's what exactly is shown in this diagram on the bottom left. So you see that there have been 3 different batches of Zarzio, 2 different batches of Neupogen manufactured in US, and 1 batch of Neupogen manufactured in Europe. So it is not only one particular batch you have to compare, you have to have multiple batches, because there is a batch to batch difference for biologics, which is very, very prominent as compared to the small molecule batch. So during the development, this comparison was done, and you can see that all the peptide map matches for the test batches as well as innovator batches. And then there is a focus on the clinically relevant attributes of the characteristics. So if you look at these chromatograms, on the left hand side, you will see those clinically relevant critical attributes, such as oxidized variants of Neupogen. And on the right side, they are not clinically relevant, such as deamination outcome and Nor-leucine variants of this particular biology. So I have shown you that the grading of the attributes. So based on the physicochemical characteristics, it is identified which attributes are contributing to safety and efficacy. So ultimately, when we talk about totality of evidence, you will see there is a comparison for structure, Then there is a comparison of function, that is the bioassays. There is a PK/PD comparison of these two, and efficacy and safety comparison. So all this comparability data was checked, reviewed by the FDA, and then FDA established that yes, these two products are similar, and that's when Giorgio got the approval for marketing in US. So after doing so much, what are the incentives these manufacturers have? So in Europe, you get exclusivity for the innovator biologic, but biosimilar, no biosimilar can be filed for 8 years, and no biosimilar will be approved for 10 years. Exclusivity can be extended for 1 more year for the innovator if it goes for a new indication. But if you talk about biosimilars in Europe, there are no market exclusivities for the first to file manufacturer. But if you come to US provides exclusivity to innovator for 4 years in terms of no other biosimilar application can be filed for 4 years, and approval cannot be granted till 12 years from the approval of reference products. So they get 12 years of exclusivity. And when you come to biosimilars, if it is a biosimilar, there is no incentive, but you get 1 year exclusivity if you are the first to file interchangeable biosimilar manufacturer. So it is difficult to establish interchangeability, and that's, if you really establish that, you get exclusivity for marketing in US. Now, important thing to look at this slide is, you will see that there have been 17 biosimilars approved by FDA from 2015 onwards. However, only 5 biosimilars have been launched in the market. You will see those orange ones, those are the launch, they are approved, but they are yet to be launched. And while for other 6, the launch is not yet announced. So it is not that getting marketing authorization is everything. You also need to launch those products in the market. There has to be a fitment in terms of the cost effectiveness, the therapy costing, and so on and so forth. And chances are there that by the time you are developing your biosimilar, the innovator would have changed its process. They would have gone for different indications. So you need to keep track of whatever is happening with the innovator's product development. This slide I like in terms, this shows that how much of the therapy cost been reduced. If you look at the right bottom, you will see that for it is total daily dose price changes after biosimilar entry for different biologics. So you'll see that in case of GCSF, more than 35% therapy cost was reduced. So it changes, like insulins and the fertility biologics. If you look, there is marginal reduction in cost of therapy, but GCSF, EPO, and HGH, there is significant cost reduction. And that's where these biosimilars give you affordable alternative to biology. And that's the reason many of the countries globally and the companies globally are getting into this particular area of healthcare modality. But if somebody has to come up with a successful biosimilar, it's very important that you have long-term strategy, you have deep pockets, that is healthy finance. You have to have competitive intelligence, because this is like you are spending so much of time and efforts and money, and if you lose to keep track of what is happening in the competition, then you will be thrown out. So very important again is to have core competence in manufacturing, and the biggest chunk of money that is going is into the clinical development and the regulatory expertise. So that's where one has to be very focused about. and of course, marketing and effective skills in terms of reaching to the patients and the practitioner and prescription and the physicians. So that's another key. So with this, I would just summarize what I was trying to tell about biosimilars. So first and foremost, this biopharmaceutical segment represents many of the future new therapeutic advances. As we see, there has been a lot of talk about even corona vaccine, right? Everybody is waiting badly for a vaccine, which is none other than one of the biopharmaceuticals. No doubt, we are talking about remdesivir is repurposed, or it is being the drug for the corona treatment, but we still are, many companies are working on a lot of biologics to have a remedy for corona. With many biopharmaceuticals nearing patent expiry, biosimilars has opened a different market potential for many companies and affiliated organizations such as CROs. Developing biosimilars is not everybody's cup of tea. It needs scientific and technical expertise. Of course, it has a lot of investments involved, but out of even after putting a lot of money and skill set, it is worth pursuing, because as I shown you on the first slide, the top revenue generating products are in the biologic space, and then so the biosimilars. So one has to have detailed comparability, which will actually substantiate similarity between the quality, safety, and efficacy profiles of this biosimilar product. So as I already told, it's an attractive market. It has huge potential and it is growing day by day. So many of Indian pharma companies are also kind of getting attracted to biosimilars segment of modalities. As far as regulations are concerned, EMA was the driver, and FDA also has come up with now detailed guidelines. So regulatory pathway is getting clear. Earlier, that was the problem. Though you have a biosimilar which is approved in India, you don't know whether other countries will accept or not. So since that clarity is coming up, this thing is becoming very, very easy. So as more and more complex biologics are being developed, I didn't touch about one class that is called as ADCs, that is antibody drug conjugates. So that's a further complex set of biologics where you have small molecules tagged linked with biologic, and you get more specific targeted treatment, or you can have more specific treatment for ailment. So the complexity of structure is day by day increasing with novel complex biologics coming on the fore. So you also get into very challenging characterization modalities, and the regulatory pathways are also evolving. So as the modalities evolve, regulatory pathways also will evolve. And at the end, it is very important that you need to have harmonized regulatory approval pathways for different countries, because we know that on the small molecule space also, many countries have their own guidelines for marketing authorization, for doing the bioequivalence studies, for validating bioidentical methods. So for the same product, you keep doing multiple studies and simply wasting a lot of your time and energy and revenue and money. So if you have harmonized guideline, like for example, the moment you say ICH guideline is to be followed, I think your product development path is clear. So that is acceptable by many countries. So I think that's the way forward. It is at the initial stage, but needs to be taken it forward. So with this, I thank you for, I'm assuming that everybody was listening. So thank you for listening, and stay healthy and stay safe. If you have any questions, I can.
Thank you very much, Saurabh sir, for your beautiful and informative talk. There are a few questions from delegate and faculty members. So now the question answer session is open. I request convener of this FTP, Radhav sir, to proceed for question answer session. Radhav sir, please.
Radhav sir, are you there? Hello.
Patil sir,
Hello.
you can proceed for the question answer session.
Hello. US Patil sir.
Okay. So we have the questions from Zoom chat box. We'll take one by one. So Rubina Kumar, are similar cheaper than the drugs like generic drug? How is sir?
I had already shown you the comparison. They are costly than small molecule generic drugs, but they are much cheaper than the novel biologic drugs.
What is the difference between biologics, biosimilar, and biologics?
I can't hear you.
DT आवाज येत नाही व्यवस्थित.
What is the difference between biologics, biosimilar, and generics?
आवाज क्लिअर येत नाही. आवाज नाही.
Am I audible?
What is the difference between biologics, biosimilars, and
Biogenerics.
biogenerics? So biogenerics is also used interchangeably for biosimilars. So biosimilars and biogenerics are same, but they are different from biologics. Biologics are novel biological entities of therapeutic use, and biosimilars are, as I shown you the definition also, they are similar versions of approved innovator biologics. So they are like, you can say, generic product and innovator product in small molecules. In biologics, the novel biologic becomes the reference product, and biosimilar becomes the follow-on or the comparable version of the innovator biologic.
Okay, so one question from Ashok Behra, sir. Biosimilar mean antibodies. So he wants some kind of the demonstration whether biosimilar can be called as the antibodies.
It's not clear. Your voice is breaking.
Biosimilars can be called as antibodies.
No, antibody is a class of biological compounds, and biosimilar can be antibody, it can be peptide, it can be a therapeutic protein, any biology. So antibody is one class of biology.
Gaikwad sir.
Hello.
Now I am connected.
Hello.
Sir,
Okay.
there is one more question, sir. What is BioBetter, sir? BioBetter. How do they differ from biosimilars, BioBetters?
Yes. So this is an interesting term that is coming up. If you say, like one example I was quoting is, your biosimilar doesn't have immunogenic potential, but the innovator has immunogenic potential. So the safety aspect of in this case is better than the innovator product. So your biologics performance from safety standpoint is better than the innovator product. So you say it is BioBetter, or even same thing can happen in terms of the efficacy of it. So BioBetters are those biologics which may show one or the other attribute performing better over the innovator product.
Okay, sir. Professor Kiran Patil, sir, please ask your question.
Hello, sir. Am I audible too?
Yes.
Yes.
Very nice session. 360-degree view of entire this biologicals. Very A to Z explanation. I just have two questions. Regarding the, we see nearby there will be a off patent of all the biologicals within this couple of years or maybe in this year. So there may be new entities may be coming in the market. So there may be changing or interchangeability of these particular drugs. So what will be the effect on this particular interchangeability of the drugs? And second thing is whether that will be cannibalize our source, because as you said, for to generate new, we need to have a strong pockets, industries which have a good expertise. So will we be able to maintain that AGR if at all we are expiring these all products? That is my first question. And regarding this corona pandemic, what will be the impact on these biosimilars? So that what may be the future, maybe in this, maybe in couple of this year, what will be the impact of this pandemic? That is, these are my two questions.
Yeah, the first question, if I understood correctly, is around the price impact, the price point, whether
Price
this,
as well as interchangeability. People will be taking the products which will be cheaper one.
yeah, I'll come to that. So now the concept of interchangeability is very strictly driven in US. Europe talks about whether the biosimilar can be interchanged with innovator or not is decided by the state legislative authorities. It
Right.
is not under the purview of European regulatory agency. In India, we don't have something like interchangeability concept as of today. So yes, as you are saying that if you compare our practice in small molecule medicine, the pharmacist gives any brand which is available, right? And the patient also asks for a cheaper version.
Cheaper one.
We also have so-called as generic medicine shops now.
Shops.
So in this scenario, bringing cheaper alternatives in biologics is good thing, but I'm sure it will be driven through the prescriptions.
Right.
So the cost of therapy, biosimilars definitely will help you to reduce. But which is the right biosimilar that suits you as a patient needs to be decided by the practicing physician. That's one. And second, you are talking about corona.
Cannibalization of this particular thing as well. As
Pardon?
we being off patent, maybe we may lost more of the CAGR, and maybe that will be harmful to our industry. And maybe those are newcomers in this arena. Maybe they may not have this particular high pocket and as well as the high expertise. So
That is
whether
true. That is true. I mean, if you look at, so I mean, I'll take the recent philosophy what Prime Minister is pushing is Atmanirbhar. So we're talking about creating those value chains within India for sustainability of small players. Those who don't have deep pockets, they cannot get into the novel modalities of therapy. So they can still do their bit in the well-proven traditional setup, small molecule industry.
yes,
Those who really want to make big foray, now since these biologics are coming off patent,
right,
that's where this cost, as I shown you, there is erosion to the tune of 30 to 40% of the
right, right,
therapy
right. That's
cost. So many, and that is like you can do that at 1/10 of the cost of development for a novel biologics. So people who really want to go to next level and they want to be a long horses of long race, they probably would like to get into biosimilars and
Right.
they would like to work in this area.
Okay.
And this in this specific situation, Corona pandemic, one of the major hits that has come is the whenever you go for developing the clinical evidence, The clinical trials has taken some bit because most of the clinical trial sites have been focusing on supporting the
Right.
COVID
Cases.
So other treatment modalities are actually, they are not getting that important. So
Right.
there is a delay in developing, but there is a lot of push for developing biological remedies for corona, for the COVID.
Yeah, we've seen that many of the companies from India has got green signal from US FDA.
There is one more question, sir.
Yep.
How much chemical structural similarities are between biologics and biosimilar? This question is from Dr. Sutapa. Chemical and structural similarities.
How much, in the sense, that is what need to be established. Now, degree of similarity will depend on how sensitive and specific tools you are using for arriving at the structure. So as I shown you, if you are not going for adequate analytical technologies for structure elucidation, now structure is not only in terms of the composition of the molecular composition, but also in terms of three-dimensional structure of these molecules. So it all depends on how adequate is the analytical technology that you have used to elucidate a particular aspect of the structure.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Saurabh sir. Is there question, sir?
Yes, sir. There are some questions from YouTube.
Yeah.
First question from Amol Shetty, sir. What are the drug delivery challenges for biosimilars or formulation challenges for biosimilars?
So formulation challenges, as you can see, you have limited routes of administration, right? And there have been a lot of work going on to see if you can deliver these biologics through oral route. So there has been a lot of work done on oral administration of insulin. And just to share with you, I was part of one of these oral insulin programs in earlier career when I was working with Biocon. And there are many companies globally, they are developing platform to deliver peptides through oral delivery. So the delivery challenge for biologics and biosimilars is the formulation should be such, the process of formulation should be such that it doesn't bring those variabilities to the structure of the biologic. That doesn't, both process as well as the product should be free of those impurities, the isotopes. So since these are very sensitive molecules, very fragile, the process is also very soft. So your challenge as a formulator is in terms of containing the structural modifications during the formulation process, as well as optimizing the delivery. So now it is very difficult to, most of the cancer treatments, you have no choice than having infusion. Most of these monoclonals are given as infusion. So if somebody works on those aspects of delivery and route of administration, if you can work very effectively, that is something a formulator has to keep in mind. So it's not only the physicochemical aspects of the formulation, but the clinical and safety outcomes of the formulation is also the formulator has to take care of.
One more question is, sir.
Yeah.
Maya Desai, she's asking, can you throw some light on biotechnology sector opportunities in India?
I already had one slide on that. So it's a huge sector. Now, when you say biotechnology, I was focusing only on biotechnology in pharma and healthcare. So biotechnology per se has many applications. You know that agriculture, agribiotech is a huge opportunity. In specifically in pharma and healthcare, if you talk about only the drugs, there's a lot of opportunity in India in terms many companies. I shown you that there are, as of today, there are around more than 25 mid-size companies in India who are into biologics and biosimilars. So why I chose this topic to talk to you, all of you guys, is again to generate interest in this particular sector, because there are very less pharmacy graduates, pharmacy postgraduates who are pursuing their career into biotech in pharma and healthcare. So, but there are ample opportunities. There are many CROs who have started working on the drug substances. The biologics and biotechnology sector needs a lot of help in developing reagents, which are very specific for your characterization. So, as far as I know, there are about 100 or different startups who are working in this particular thrust area. So the opportunities are increasing. I think we need to adopt those skill set which is required. Of course, that is little different than our traditional chemical business.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Shinde sir.
Okay. Can you conclude?
Yes, yes.
On behalf of Bharati Vidyapith College of Pharmacy, Kolhapur, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Srinivas for sharing his expertise and experiences in biosimilar emerging affordable modality in healthcare. He has give coverage on difference between small molecules and biologicals, biologics analyzed by various methods. He also touched on requirement for approval of biosimilars and development path and characterization of biosimilars product. He also given emphasis on regulatory guidelines on biosimilars and status of biosimilars product in India. We appreciate your efforts for collaborating, for elaborating very interesting and complex subject of biosimilars in simple manner. I must mention deep sense of appreciation for his knowledge and presence. You have addressed all questions and queries of delegates. I wish that information is very informative to all the delegates will be helpful in their research in this direction. Thank you very much for sparing valuable time with us. I am sure that your association with us will be long lasting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Over to Professor D.T. Gaikwad, sir.
Thank you very much, Shinde sir. Thank you very much, Save sir. Now all the delegates are requested to join afternoon session at 2:55 p.m. Feedback form for both sessions will be released after the next section. Thank you all. I declare this session is over. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay safe and stay healthy.